Peter, Chris Wareheim again here. Thanks for sending in another video. Looking at your notes and watching the whole video through, I definitely see what you mean in the 6, 7, 8, 9 kind of complex. I do agree we can definitely find some speed through that section. I'm going to use your first lap. I think this is actually your best lap. To be honest, kind of similar to New Jersey, it's a very solid baseline. I actually had a buddy of mine send me a video just to kind of look at in a newer Porsche, in a GT3 RS, and he was only turning, I think, 115s. So to be in the 119 range in a 997 C2, yes, it's not stock, but it's pretty solid. So I was really looking at that video more just to see kind of lap time wise in a non-race car. So what you feel in that kind of pendulum effect is I think 997 was maybe the last kind of year or last generation that really had that. As you move into the 991s, that's pretty much been gone. The technology that they brought with those cars have kind of eliminated that, but there is still a little bit of that with the 997. A lot of that is caused by kind of a little bit too much maintenance throttle and not getting that weight transfer to really load the car properly. The car doesn't like to necessarily float a lot of speed in, I would say. Some of the later apexes and trying to float a lot of speed in, that platform of the car just stays almost too centered, which is kind of counterintuitive, right? But with the rear engine car, once that you can use that kind of pendulum to your advantage a little bit with the rotation. But we want to make sure that when we're going back to throttle, we're really putting the weight back on the rear to really settle the rear. If you're not really settling the rear, you do feel that kind of pendulum effect. And a lot of that comes from just that kind of maintenance throttle and not really able to accelerate. But kind of similar to New Jersey, your baseline is very solid here. So let's get going on the lap and see if we can find a little bit of time here. So into turn one. Looks like we're braking right about the 5 board. That's pretty spot on to where I would be braking here in this car. You can brake a little bit later, but you just run the risk of getting a little bit of understeer, having to hold the brake pressure too long. I do like your line, your turn in here. Good use of the track. I saw there's a little puddle on the exit there, so it was hard to really maybe the track conditions weren't the best today. Good. So Summit here, and this is pretty standard for a lot of people, when they come through here at turn 3, they almost exit a little bit too far down the curbing. You can actually exit a little bit earlier and kind of get on the curbing back here, because as long as your hands are straight and you're exiting kind of parallel to that curbing, you have road on your left here to let the car track out, right? So there is room to carry more speed through here. And I think through here, kind of similar to what I was talking about, we may be able to just kind of pick up the throttle a little bit earlier so we can kind of start transferring that weight on the rear a little bit sooner. So let's go back here a little bit. So I would want to start picking up the throttle here. Not necessarily accelerating, but just that kind of initial 10, 15% throttle, boom. Corner does open up a little bit, so you don't have to worry about that understeer so much here. But it's just going to help settle the rear a little bit. Yeah, and we can, like I said, we can just get to that curbing a little bit sooner. You just be able to carry a little bit more speed through. here's where we can gain definitely a lot of speed. So the general problem through this section that happens is this. So you come through good speed through here. We start turning too early. You're actually set up pretty well there. And since the repavement, it's a little bit harder to see, but there is a seam. Let me get my annotation here. You know, there is a seam kind of right here that I like to put the center of the car on, even maybe just a little bit right of center of this seam. You don't need to be all the way over to the right. In this car, you definitely want to be a little bit further to the right than a little bit narrower. But you don't need to be all the way to the outside edge of the track. So what happens here is, get going again, you start kind of turning early. We get down to the inside. Look how early we're down to the inside, right? So now we've essentially made this corner a lot tighter. Well, two things. One, I don't mind the early apex here. Well, this is so early that we have to wait. And then we want to go back to power here. And the car is kind of pointed off the track at this point, right? And you use a lot of road on the exit, and you're always having to turn a little bit, okay? So let's go back. Let's see how we can improve this. Now, if we can stay straight here as when we go to the brakes, right? So I'd like to kind of still be dead center on the road. Now we can start to turn in. I don't want to be down to the inside till maybe right about here. So now instead of, as I start to exit here, and this is where sometimes just the smallest little changes can play big dividends. You know, instead of the car being pointed like this, if I can get the car pointed just a little bit more up the road, right? I'll have a little bit straighter hands when I go back to power. And I'll also be able to accelerate a little bit harder and get a better drive, right? And I'll also be able to carry a little bit more minimum speed through the center because I don't have to put as much wheel input in. I'm making, you know, the corner much tighter by turning earlier and kind of entering narrow. So with this car, that will help quite a bit. You can see you're really struggling to put the power down there. And you just have it rotated a little bit more, make this more of a straighter exit. You're going to find a little bit more drive and speed out. So this is one of your better sections. You're not as kind of maintenance throttle as much as some of the others. But how I like to take this section is I really like to drive it in pretty hard, carry a lot of roll speed through here. Try to get it rotated a little bit better. So I like to keep it a little bit tighter at this point. I'm still on the inside curb here. But then right about here, I can really accelerate. Then I accelerate nice and hard to where I get to the curbing here. Boom. Maybe even a little bit of understeer, which I'm okay with. Then I make a little bit of a lift to get the car pointed back to the inside, which you actually do a pretty good job here of doing. Get onto the curbing. Boom. Now here, I have straighter hands because I made that lift. I get that little bit of rotation. As that kind of, you feel that rotation, you can start straightening your hands back out. Boom. That's when I can be a little bit more aggressive with my hands. And I wouldn't even, let me think, maybe you can change your shifting through here. That would help a little bit. Let me look at this just one more time. Yeah, so here's a question, it's something to play with. And I don't know where you are in your RPM range, but are we able to not make a shift there, but make a shift here, right? So can we, I know that shift, sometimes we can use a shift as our lift, right? If we need a lift and we kind of need the shift. But I'm just wondering if we can make it through there in that gear and then make the upshift as we turn for 9 here. So that's just a question of, you know, you can kind of experiment with and play around with. So hopefully this helps through this section. You know, what I see a lot is that we're just too much maintenance throttle. We kind of don't drive hard enough into this first part here. We're let it come wide a little bit too early. So that you can see I'm already kind of, it's hard for you to accelerate really hard because you're already kind of getting up to that curbing. So you're having to still turn, and you're just going to get understeer and run the risk of, as you start to put a little bit more input here, that understeer become a slide, right? You can make a little bit bigger lift here and then boom, harder to throttle. This is good. Yeah, and I think here, you know, you can just work on trying to carry more speed, right? You're not breaking through here. It's just how much are you committing to throttle? That's going to be the telltale. Your line's good through here. I like it. Nothing wrong with it. Just getting more comfortable, right, with that speed. And then a little bit coming onto the front straightaway. Excuse me. This is where I talk about kind of that floating too much speed in a little bit. And I like that we're trying to really focus on our minimum speed, but I'm just wondering if, you know, we're coming in, we're braking a little bit too early, a little bit too soft. Because some laps, it just seems like the car's just floating a little bit too much through there. Just wondering if we can brake a little bit later, put a little bit more load, get the car a little bit more load on the car right about here. Then we can pick up the throttle, maybe, you know, 15%. Boom, back hard on the throttle. Good use of the road, good line, nothing wrong with it. But I just wonder if we're not braking deep enough. We can just put a little bit more load on the front and on the car in general. And then as we transfer and release that brake, right, it's that load just transferring back to the rear as we release that brake. But we're not, when we brake soft, right, and this isn't always the case, but specifically with this car, when you brake really soft like that, or it seems soft to me, at least in the video, without seeing actual brake numbers, you know, when you're going in there, that platform just stays a little bit too flat. So then when you turn in, there just isn't enough load, which in general is grip. So what happens is you go over those bumps a little bit, right? And you're trying to float that speed, the car just wants to kind of undulate over it. Where if you can put a little bit more load, a little bit more dig those tires into the track, you might find a little bit more stability onto the front straight. So this was a 120.6. Let me just fast forward. I thought I saw a 119. Fast forward a little bit here. Maybe I was wrong. Still, that 120 is not too bad. And if we can improve a little bit in that 789 section, right, we're definitely going to find a good bit and get into the high 118s, low 119s, which would be extremely solid in this car, in my opinion. So give that a shot, Peter. Like I said, your fundamentals from the last video to here are really, really strong. That 789 complex, or 6789, you know, making sure we're not turning too early, exiting too wide, trying to get that car rotated a little bit better so that we can accelerate out of the corner. We're not kind of really having to, slowly feed that throttle. Just one last thing, if I were to kind of look at what that throttle trace would look like right now, this is kind of what it looks like in red, right? And this is flat out. This is kind of what I want to see. So you may pick up the throttle in those slower corners just a little bit later. So say we'll pick it up here, but we'll be able to be more aggressive and just get to full throttle a little bit sooner, which will just help. But like I said, it all happens if we're able to keep that car tighter a little bit around that apex, so that we're not getting on the throttle a little bit too early, right? And having that understeer by turning in too early and having it run a little bit too wide, that we just aren't able to feed that throttle in. Where if we drive it in, little bit better rotation through the center, we get our hands a little bit straighter as we go back to power, and get a better drive off the corners. Sometimes minimum speed, by trying to carry too much minimum speed, you can actually hurt yourself if you're not able to really accelerate out of the corner. So there is that balance that we can definitely work on. So hopefully this helps, Pierre. Just like the last video, I'll have some notes in there for you turn by turn, so you can print it out, look at it, and we'll also have some goals specifically for this track. And then I'll look through from your other goals if there's some just general goals that I think you kind of improved on here. I'll check those off for you.